Korea.
And on the back of that report, let's get some further clarity from the chairperson of the Interfaith Council, Archbishop Anthony Muheria, live from Nyeri County. Archbishop, thank you so much for your time this evening. First things first, Archbishop, considering the spike in numbers, was there really any urgency in reopening places of worship at this time?
I think it's clear that Kenyans want and wish to be back in their places of worship. And it is also important as a step, on one hand, to pray and plead with God, which is part of fighting of COVID. But also we believe that the religious leaders themselves have got a greater persuasive power in order to bring a lot of our congregants to agree on compliance.
And yet, Archbishop, those who are against the reopening of places of worship at this time cite that case in South Korea, patient 31, who went to a religious gathering, and as a result of her movements, a spike was witnessed in South Korea that made international headlines. Has that been taken into consideration?
Yes, it was. And basically, that's why the restrictions are very tight indeed. And we do want to contain certain sectors like the age brackets so that we try gradually to widen the space of participation, but really adhering to very, very strict conditions and regulations.
Okay, and I actually want us to probe one of those guidelines right now of persons over 58 years who have been asked to stay away from places of worship. You're effectively telling them that for 2020, possibly 2021 as well, they should not get near a church, a mosque, a temple. That's the message, right?
Not at all, not at all. What we are saying, we are secure in them. We are concerned about their safety. And therefore, at least in this initial stage, we believe that for their safety, they should stay at home. They're encouraged to stay at home, and with innovative ways we're going to reach to them. This is a phased reopening, so we are in the initial phase, and as we go along we will see how we can accommodate them as the danger subsides.
How will this be enforced? Will you have a way of checking?
That again, as the President said, we have been given the role now of individual responsibility, community responsibility. It isn't just a hard, fast policing way. It is, we are caring for our brothers and sisters who are vulnerable. We are caring for our elderly parents and grandparents. And so we will convince them in a way that you may say persuasively, so that they don't endanger themselves, at least for the initial stage.
Okay,
going forward, we will see how they can fit into the stages and the phases as we continue widening that space.
We'll begin to see how that will play out in places of worship over the coming week. Finally, one restriction that many Kenyans have also raised questions about is where you have not more than 100 worshippers in a church at a particular time. Considering the varying seating capacity of different places of worship, how was the number 100 coined or conceptualized as the magical number in all this? I
think it's not a magical number in itself. First, the small places of worship will have to follow the 1.5 meter social distancing guideline. That means many of them may not even reach that number that has been stipulated. It's a cap, meaning that in this initial stage, we want to limit the exposure as far as possible to a cap of 100, no matter how big the sanctuary, temple, or church is, or that will help contain any surge or any infection that may happen. So this is why it's phased, it's gradual. And so going forward, we will see a certain adjustment of those indicators or numbers so as they respond to the actual situation of COVID infection and also of compliance. So our real request and plea with Kenyans is that we really follow those directives and compliance, not only in the churches or places of worship and the mosques, but at all places.
Thank you for that clarification. A final question. A poll hasn't been done, but many would assume that many of our church leaders are over, church, temple, mosque leaders are over the age of 58. Do those restrictions apply to them as well?
Certainly there is a certain consideration for those, and it is up to their superiors or the person who oversee so as to see how to adjust that requirement. For sure, if the leaders are of that age, we are starting a certain service or worship, public worship, then it's clear that those leaders who are less vulnerable are the ones who will be called to come and lead. So that call, I will say, is left to the responsibility of the individual leaders of the congregations, of the assemblies, of the mosques, of the churches.
Archbishop,